Okay, class. Well, we are into our very last week, and it's kind of an interesting week. You don't have any discussion this week, but you just need to finish up some of the items that are pending. This is finals week, so anyway, you're going to have a few more readings, chapters 25 and 26 on social networking and emerging technologies. Of course, you can apply this to some of the newer social networking tools as well that are out there that may not have been listed in the book since a few years ago when it was written, but that's the trouble with educational technology field, is trying to keep up with all the changes that happen in such a short amount of time that we have. There is a tech talk on Google Earth, and so this is an opportunity to learn from Andre about Google Earth and how it can be used in educational situations, and I think Andre has some interesting ideas about using this in a field that he's interested in, so it's fun to learn about that. And then finally, you'll finish up and submit the task-centered learning project. And this is a project plan to be presented in different ways. You can present it as a podcast or recorded PowerPoint presentation of about 6 to 10 minutes in length, or on a paper about 6 to 10 pages. And it's going to discuss the elements of task-centered learning. Well, first you're going to discuss a tool, a technology tool resource, and how it works, and then introduce the concept of task-centered learning, introduce the elements of task-centered learning, learning tasks, activation of prior knowledge, demonstration, modeling, application, integration, and exploration. So each of those will have their own section that you'll introduce what that means. Discuss a learning task that could incorporate the tool then. This is where your creativity comes into play, because you're going to think about a learning task that incorporates the tool, and discuss how other elements of task-centered learning, including those other areas such as activation of prior knowledge, demonstration, modeling, application, integration / exploration, could work with the tool. And you'll submit that to me. Now, just to take a little bit closer look at the rubric here, I'm going to look for a clear and complete introduction to the technology resource or tool. I am going to look at task-centered learning itself and see that it is introduced clearly, and that the elements of task-centered learning are introduced accurately too. Now remember, task-centered learning is a model for learning that centers the learning on real-world tasks. In other words, students don't just do homework, they don't just do problems. They do something that is like what a professional outside of school might do. That's the challenge. The real challenge, I think, with task-centered learning and my years of studying it is really this. It's really finding a learning task that incorporates a technology tool and that also is realistic enough to match or to be close to what someone outside of school might do. So for this project, your students, your fictional students, if you're not a teacher, or your students if you are going to become professionals, and they're going to do something close to what a professional might do. Now you might have to take that thing that professionals do and make it more simplified for your students. Sure, that's part of task-centered learning still, but you are going to do it. You're going to do a whole task, and so that's the trick. Now you're going to look at how the tool could work in the other elements of how a learning task that could incorporate the tool is discussed, an adequate explanation of how the tool could work in the other elements of task-centered learning. And those are the 4 elements that are mentioned above in the assignment. And then it looks for length and then quality. So that's what it looks for in this rubric. Just to give you some more clarification too on this rubric and what task-centered learning is, because that was a while ago in the semester that we talked about this. I'm going back to the week on task-centered learning, and you can do this as well. You can look at the readings on task-centered learning, but this is from the one called What is Task-Centered Learning? And in that article that I wrote along with a colleague are some nice elements that kind of list this, especially on this left-hand side, essential elements, for instance, of learning tasks. Okay, so there are 5 elements to task-centered learning, and learning tasks is the main element. It's the one that I'm kind of focusing on for this assignment. And so it says, base your tasks on real-world performance. So in this assignment, you're going to choose one task, and you need to base it on real-world performance. How are you going to do that? So obviously with more mature students in high school, let's say, they're going to be able to do something that's a lot closer to real-world performance. But if you have, let's say, kindergartners, it might be a little bit different. You might have to make that task more simplified. The next one is use whole tasks. That means do the entire task that a real-world performance person might do or a real-world professional might do. Now again, you might have to simplify it, but you can do the whole task from beginning to end. And this is progress from easy to difficult. Just means, you take a task and you might have one task that's very simple, and then your next task might be a little bit more difficult. This might not apply to so much to this assignment because you're just choosing one learning task. But if you were to do a full task-centered learning experience, you would have sequences of easy to difficult tasks that students would complete. You're going to fade or reduce support over time. So in other words, at the beginning of the task, there will be a lot more teacher involvement or a lot more help from different sources. But at the end of it, you'll fade and let the students complete the work themselves more in the end. Adjust the first task to max learner expertise. And I think I've covered that pretty well already. You have to adjust it. I mean, it's not going to be, your students won't have professional knowledge or skill, so you're going to have to adjust the task to match their expertise. And then vary tasks to support transfer. And that again is not so much for this assignment, but it's more for if you were going to do a sequence of learning tasks, one after the other, you would want to make sure that they vary from one another so that your learners can be able to do them outside of the situation that you're in. And then, so the next one is activation of prior knowledge. What does that mean? Well, you're going to address any learning gaps that your students have. How do you activate their prior knowledge? Well, you talk about what their prior knowledge is and address any gaps that they have between what they should know to get started on this task and what they don't. And then begin with a first task that learners can handle. So prior knowledge is just basically looking at what learners already know before you start on this learning process and addressing anything that might be missing from what they know. The next area is demonstration/modeling, and this is an important part of task-centered learning, is to show how to perform the task. So you're going to demonstrate them, you're going to model for them what they should do to complete this task or what they should do. Provide supportive information relevant to the task and procedural information relevant to the task. So again, supportive information is general domain knowledge. In this example, it talks about a biology experience in which higher education students learned some basic knowledge of genetics and other biology concepts. These are the concepts that students need to understand in order to complete the task. And then procedural information is more of the step-by-step knowledge, like what is the procedure for completing this task? What's the first step? What's the second step? And those are different types of knowledge from one another, so that's important to think about. And then you have the application phase. This should be a part of your project as well. This is where learners actually do the task as part of the learning process. This is their practice time. This is their opportunity to try it out and to do it. And while they do it, you're going to provide coaching and feedback, which would be faded over time. So make sure there's an application phase. A lot of what happens, I think, in education is that we don't give learners enough practice. We don't give them application in the way that this would recommend. They have opportunities to regurgitate or to say back to us the things that they're learning, but they do not have opportunities to actually practice and try it out and practice again and again and have that coaching and feedback from the instructor. And then finally, integration and exploration, and learners transfer their new knowledge and skill to everyday life. So you have to think then, after they've already done the task, after they've tried it out, they've gotten coaching and feedback from you, how are they going to transfer their new knowledge and skill to a different situation or to everyday life? How will they bring this skill into everyday life? So it's a really important part of task-centered learning. So if you have all these elements and you've covered these very well and you fit them into the right place, then you're going to do well on this assignment. Now, actually, you don't actually have to implement this in a classroom. You just have to create the plan for it. You have to create a nice task-centered learning plan that uses technology in an advantageous way to support all of these 5 elements, starting with learning tasks, of course, and then going to how these activation, demonstration, application, and integration fit in with the learning task in your assignment. So that will hopefully get you started. This is, I think, my last video for this semester, unless something else needs to be clarified through video format. So good luck getting started this week, and have a wonderful week.